Well damn, it's only been about a month since I released my Undertale video, and I could have never predicted that Toby Fox would come out with another game so soon. It's almost as if he's watching down on me, shining light on my life. Anyways, I've been looking forward to this day for a while. I've always pondered what Toby's next big project would be, whether it's a sequel or an entirely new game. I just couldn't wait to see what he had in store for us. I loved Undertale so much, and I figured this was only the beginning for Toby to establish him as a big name in the game industry. Well, after wondering what his next game would be for a good few years, we finally know the answer, which was, of course, Deltarune. Now, before I go further into this video, I'm just going to give a spoiler warning here. I may mention some plot points from Deltarune and Undertale in this video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then proceed carefully. Well, after Toby wilded out on Twitter via his own account and the Undertale one, we all sat with bated breath at what he had in store for us, before bam, he released Chapter 1 of Deltarune to everyone's surprise. I don't think any of us quite expected what we got here. Not only a new game, but chapter by chapter installments? Sign me up, boys. I played it, and though it was fairly short, I absolutely adored it. It was funny, charming, dramatic, and essentially encapsulated the same feeling I got playing Undertale for the first time. Not only do I think this new game is amazing in its own right, but I'm willing to bet it is, or at least will be better than Undertale. So I'm here to tell you why Deltarune will be a perfect sequel, though it's actually quite confusing. Is it a sequel? Is it a prequel? I mean, Azrael's still alive, Chara isn't anywhere in sight. Oh wait. But luckily, Toby actually cleared this up by saying it's basically a separate world to Undertale. The story of Deltarune won't affect any of the characters in Undertale however you left them. So, in other words, I think it's safe to say this game takes part in an alternate dimension, which would explain why characters from Undertale still make an appearance. So you may be wondering, why do I think Deltarune is better than Undertale? How does it improve? What does it do new? Does it include Sans? Well, I'll be discussing where the game excels and what it improves on, so without further ado, let's jump in. Oh, and yes, Sans is in the game. Sans? The most notable improvement to the core gameplay that you can notice quite instantly are the changes made to the game's combat. Now, it's not too different from what we saw in Undertale. You can fight, act, use items, and even spear your enemies. So it's familiar enough, but there are some new features. Of course, the most obvious being, like a traditional JRPG, you're in a party. This, of course, opens up to so much more choice and strategy. One of the things some people complained about previously was how bare bones and simple the actual combat of Undertale was. But for Deltarune, it's a much more rich experience, which I believe will only get richer with future chapters. For example, you can use Chris to act on an enemy to set them up for a spear. Then, on Ralsei, you can spare them to make a quick takedown. Well, a pacifist takedown. It's brilliant against large groups, as you can make the whole dodging process much easier. Ralsei also offers the use of magic. She can put enemies to sleep if they're tired enough, and even heal your party members. Having a party also incorporates other elements. You have to keep all of your party's health in check, which makes items feel way more necessary than in Undertale. It gives more of a JRPG vibe and actually forces you to plan stuff, which Undertale failed to do. There's less of an emphasis on mercy or genocide, but it replaces that with a much more enjoyable gameplay experience. So you're free to be a child of God or a demon straight from the bowels of hell. Either way, it won't affect the story too much. Fight mechanics work a little differently too. It arguably takes way more skill to hit a perfect attack, but acting with enemies is just way more fun than spamming attacks that I never really found the want or even need to use the fight button at all. There's even new mechanics not even related to the combat. There's a new run mechanic which makes traversing the map so much easier and less time consuming. Enemies even appear on the overworld instead of you just randomly encountering them. So if you're quick enough, you can avoid the fight altogether. While walking around, you'll also encounter many obstacles that you have to avoid, much like Undyne with her spears in the first game. It adds some more challenge that feels like a more intense puzzle at times. You can also see your soul this time around, which is a nice touch and gives you a good indication of where your hitbox actually is. Puzzles are also back in full swing, giving some fairly challenging stuff. Though I am hoping they get progressively more challenging per chapter. I want a puzzle to mind-boggle me, driving me slowly to the brink of insanity as I struggle to even think straight. You know, on second thoughts, maybe these are fine, never mind, forget what I said. Even past the core mechanics, the creativity this time around is astounding. Some fights are very unique, and in some cases extremely hilarious. Take this enemy for example. In order to peacefully handle the fight, you have to rebuild his body back to normal in order to make him happy, which is honestly just genius. The enemies are just way more creative than Undertale could have ever dreamed of, and depending on how many chapters they exactly are and what they entail, I'm hoping that each one will have just as much creativity as this first one. From the boss fights to the regular enemies, Deltarune has excelled at improving all the flaws that Undertale's gameplay had. But how does the story hold up? Well, it's not really fair to compare the story to Undertale, seeing as this one chapter is not the complete tale, while Undertale itself is a full package. There's much more to come for Deltarune, but with the little scoop we've had so far, I think it's safe to say that the story is shaping up to be even better and on a much grander scale. I'll get into what I mean by that in a moment, but first, let's talk about the basic plot. You play as Chris, who's Toriel's child along with Azrael, who apparently went to university. Yeah, this alternative universe stuff is weird, bear with me. You go to school and have to get choked with Susie, who is the tyrant bully of the place. So after trying to eat your damn face off, you head to the closet to get the choke before suddenly, oh shit! Where the hell are we and what the fuck are we wearing? You mean Ralsei after being terrorized by Lancer? I mean, just look at that face and tell me he's not a pure psychopath. And from there on out, you're on a quest to reach the fountain and return home with many ups and downs along the way. So already you have a clear goal to be reaching towards that's actually very similar to Undertale's. However, I'm actually way more fond of these characters compared to Undertale's. Chris looks way cooler than Frisk, especially with the armor he dons once in the strange world. His pink sword also helps make him a little more iconic than Frisk. Just seeing your own character in every fight is enough to get more of a connection to them. Same with Susie, who has some incredible character development that you'd think would be rushed but is handled very well in just one chapter, and by the end is almost a completely different person. Ralsei, while we know little about them, has some clear personality, and it's pretty easy to see why they become the profile picture of literally every single person on Twitter. Oh, and Lancer's Chad face, of course. Lancer is basically an actual funny Sans. While I do love Sans' character, especially when it comes to the genocide run, his pun humor is, well, let's just say it's as hollow as a bone. Lancer, on the other hand, actually has some more creative jokes and genuinely made me laugh at a lot of points in the game. Matter of fact, everything in Deltarune is just way funnier than Undertale. I never really saw the humor as one of Undertale's main strengths, but Jesus, I'd be lying if I didn't admit that Deltarune's humor is 100% one of the best things about it. The story of Deltarune is just so far on a much grander scale than previously seen. It seems way more cinematic than Undertale ever did. You essentially just followed a linear path without any real detours or plot points in the story that changed your course of action. Deltarune, on the other hand, has a few of these. You have the school conflict, Susie joining the enemy team, and of course Lancer running away, who ends up putting you in jail. This is when the game's at its peak. You get to see Susie's point of view while you feel pretty helpless in jail, and this all comes crashing down to an emotionally charged confrontation with Lancer, which is in my opinion the best part of chapter 1. It's moments like these that were on par with some of the events witnessed in Undertale's pacifist run, so if future chapters manage to include more of these emotional, large and grand moments, then I'm sure the story will be way better than Undertale. Only problem is, I can't really tell where the story can go from here. On its own, chapter 1 feels pretty complete. You beat the king, save the land, and Susie says that you two should go back tomorrow. So, what could even happen at this point? Will you go to other worlds instead? Will a new threat arise? I have no idea where the future chapters could go, honestly, and that excites me so much. With how unpredictable it is, I'm looking forward to playing the final product and hopefully feeling genuinely surprised. In Undertale, while I did find the overall aesthetic and graphical style appealing in some parts, overall I couldn't really argue that the graphics and the environments were exactly anything to marvel over. Most were not too colourful, there wasn't much interesting things to look at. This didn't harm the game by any means, but again, it wasn't a strong point. Fast forward to Deltarune, however, and oh my god, it's amazing. All of the environments this time look so much more colourful, unique, and interesting. You have Toriel's home that has way more detail than it did in the original game. The entire town that's full of colourful characters and an equally colourful town. But I'm especially a big fan of how they've differentiated the overworld to the dark world. For a start, the first thing you notice is the atmosphere is completely different down here. Areas can range from surreal and vibrant places that look out of this world to these scary and ambient areas that leave the player feeling vulnerable and worried of what's to come. Then there's the way they differentiate the lighteners from the darkeners. Everyone who lives in the world of dark has coloured token sprites such as Ralsei and Lancer. Meanwhile, Chris and Susie have the traditional black and white sprites we see in Undertale. It's little things like this that help build the world in a really subtle way. There's also less subtle things like how the character designs completely change once dropped into the world of dark. I don't really get how this works, but considering how cool all of these designs look in comparison, yeah, I'm not complaining. In some ways, it even tops the great design of some of Undertale's characters. There's also a lot more movement. While Undertale stayed pretty true to its sprites for the most part, this time around there's a lot more animation, which helps in this game feeling more cinematic and alive than Undertale. Whether something as simple as Toriel opening the curtains, the battle animations which bring your moves to life, or even just Susie and Lancer laughing at your pain. It's all very distinct from its original counterpart. No enemy, no main character, not even many areas look the same. Even Toriel's home looks very different in comparison. It may portray the same feeling of a warm home, but its look has been completely overhauled. Everything here is original besides the characters taken from Undertale and I suppose Chris's overworld design, which, let's face it, is basically a lanky Chara. But I can't really credit Toby for all of this, as these were done by equally talented people. There's of course Tiyuki, aka Tammy-chan, who did a lot of the art for the original Undertale, and she comes back once again to nail everything she touches to no one's surprise really. Then there's Kanotine, who did a few of the character designs, mainly the card inspired ones. So it's really thanks to these two that we got a very visually pleasing game. And of course, who could forget the music? The thing Undertale is widely known for. Now, Undertale's OST was pretty perfect in my eyes, offering 101 amazing tracks that are widely loved. So can Deltarune compare with this titan? Yes, very well in fact. Not only does it meet the standards Undertale set, I'd say that Deltarune's music has pretty much surpassed it, which isn't really surprising seeing as Toby Fox most likely has improved within these few years, as all musicians tend to do. Now, you may say,
Kazoo, you can't compare these songs. I mean, surely they're completely different.
well, you big stupid dumpling, that's where you're wrong. See, there are a few tracks that almost fit in the same mold that they did in Undertale. Let's look at the most obvious one being the battle theme. Undertale's battle theme had a nice ring to it, but it didn't really make it feel like an intense battle. It was more akin to a relaxed Pokemon battle. Then, Deltarune's battle theme, aka Rude Buster, comes in like... Undertale's opening monologue had this rather relaxed song that told the origins of the world. The music set in a peaceful tone that's obviously inspired by Earthbound's OST, much like many of Undertale's features. Deltarune also has a similar section that tells the tale of the dark world, but the music for this one is just such an incredible improvement. Oh, just listen to that tune. It swaps that more relaxing music to instead build up this bombastic epic score that really does make this feel like a legendary tale. There are a few more examples of this, but honestly, the music is unique in its own ways too, and I'm confident in saying that it's a much better improvement. It also carries Undertale's use of leitmotif. Now, if you know music in Undertale, you may have recognized how a lot of the tracks will actually follow a lot of leitmotif, carrying the same tune throughout the majority of the songs, which helps create a nice flow and consistency. And Deltarune is no exception, with a lot of the songs having the same leitmotif as the incredible song by Laura Shigihara titled In the Dark.
When the light is running low and the shadows start to grow.
It follows all the same principles of music that Toby originally set in the first game, and while the tracks may not be as memorable as many Undertale songs, I believe once we get all the chapters, the final product, then we will truly have an amazing soundtrack that can not only rival, but surpass Undertale. But at the end of the day, it's not really fair to judge the game just yet. As I've said, Deltarune is an unfinished product. While Chapter 1 is good enough to be a standalone game, there is obviously more to the story, more to the characters, more to the gameplay, and even more music tracks to come. From what we can judge at the moment, however, I feel confident in declaring this project will outrival Undertale, no doubt. After all, this is the kind of RPG Toby originally wanted to make, but instead made Undertale as it was a way to prove he could make an RPG. It may take a few years before we get the full amount of chapters, but honestly, no matter how long it's gonna take, I'm still incredibly excited, and I just can't wait to see what Toby's got in store for us. But hey, how about more sounds instead? Hey, thanks for watching! There may or may not be an upload for a little while, as the next video will be the start of a new series I've been planning for quite a while. Hopefully it'll end up being pretty good, so I hope you look forward to it. As always, feel free to subscribe and follow my social medias in the description. Later guys!